Well, no. The question is, would it in fact increase jobs or kill jobs? The Reagan recovery, which I participated in passing, in 7 years created for this current economy the equivalent of 25 million new jobs, raised federal revenue by $800 billion a year in terms of the current economy, and clearly worked. It's a historic fact. The Obama administration is an anti-jobs, anti-business, anti-American energy, destructive force, and we shouldn't talk about what we do in 2013. The Congress this year, this next week, ought to repeal the Dodd-Frank bill. They ought to repeal the Sarbanes-Oxley bill. They ought to start creating jobs right now, because for those 14 million Americans, this is a depression now.
So the Speaker just said, Congresswoman, repeal Dodd-Frank. Answer the American out there who says, maybe I don't like all of the details, but after what happened in 2007 and 2008, I don't want Wall Street to not have somebody looking at them, watching what they're doing.
Well, I'm looking forward to answering that question, because I introduced the repeal bill to repeal Dodd-Frank because it's an over-the-top bill that will actually lead to more job loss rather than job creation. But before I fully answer that, I just want to make an announcement here for you, John, on CNN tonight. I filed today my paperwork to seek the office of the Presidency of the United States today, and I'll very soon be making my formal announcement. So I wanted you to be the first to know.
That. All right. Well, welcome. Now, if you're out there and you don't get the distinction, coming into the night, Congresswoman Bachmann was exploring. She hadn't taken that last step. The other candidates had taken it. I'm sure they welcome you to the fray. Let's continue the conversation. I want to come to Congressman Paul. You're all here saying the President of the United States is making the economy worse. Has he done one thing? Has he done one thing right when it comes to the economy in this country?
Boy, that's a tough question. No, I can't think of anything, but may I answer the question that you alluded to before about whether or not 5% is too optimistic. No, there's nothing wrong without setting a goal of 5 or 10 or 15% if you have a free market economy. We're trying to unwind a Keynesian bubble that's been going on for 70 years, and you're not going to touch this problem until you liquidate the bad debt and the malinvestment, go back to work. But you have to have sound money. You have to recognize how we got into trouble. We got into trouble because we had a financial bubble, and it's caused by the Federal Reserve. If you don't look at monetary policy, we will continue the trend of the last decade. We haven't developed any new jobs in the last decade. Matter of fact, we've had 30 million new people and no new jobs. It's because they don't, but people don't understand monetary policy and central economic planning. Free markets will give you 10 or 15% growth or whatever, and you will not have to turn it off because you think it's going to cause inflation. It doesn't work that way.
I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to ask one more time politely. We want to get as many voters as we can involved, so please try to shorten the follow-up answers just a bit if you can. Let's go back to Tom in Plymouth. He has another voter with a question.
Yes, thank you, John. I'm here with Sylvia Smith. She's from Littleton, and she is a freelance journalist who's written about the healthcare industry. She has a question about healthcare.
Yes, as a journalist who's written frequently about healthcare and medicine for both newspapers and for corporate publications, I'm very concerned about the overreach of the massive healthcare legislation that was passed last year. My question is, what would each candidate do? What 3 steps would they take to defund Obamacare and repeal it as soon as possible? Thank you.
Congresswoman Bachmann, let's start with you on that.
Thank you, John. Sylvia, thank you for that great question. I was the very first member of Congress to introduce the full-scale repeal of Obamacare. And I want to make a promise to everyone watching tonight. As President of the United States, I will not rest until I repeal Obamacare. It's a promise. Take it to the bank, cash the check. I'll make sure that that happens. This is the symbol and the signature issue of President Obama during his entire tenure. And this is a job killer, Sylvia. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, has said that Obamacare will kill 800,000 jobs. What could the president be thinking by passing a bill like this, knowing full well it will kill 800,000 jobs? Senior citizens get this more than any other segment of our population because they know in Obamacare, the President of the United States took away $500 billion, $500 billion out of Medicare, shifted it to Obamacare to pay for younger people, and it's senior citizens who have the most to lose in Obamacare.
Governor Romney, just yesterday, Governor Pawlenty, who is to your left on the stage tonight, called your Massachusetts plan, which you know has become a focal point of the criticism in this campaign from your friends here, Obamacare. Obamacare. Is that a fair comparison?
You know, let me say a couple things. First, if I'm elected president, I will repeal Obamacare, just as Michelle indicated. And also, on my first day in office, if I'm lucky enough to have that office, I will grant a waiver to all 50 states from Obamacare. Now, there's some similarities and there's some big differences. Obamacare spends $1 trillion. If it were perfect, and it's not perfect, it's terrible, we can't afford more federal spending. Secondly, it raises $500 billion in taxes. We didn't raise taxes in Massachusetts. Third, Obamacare takes $500 billion out of Medicare and funds Obamacare. We, of course, didn't do that. And finally, ours was a state plan, a state solution, and if people don't like it in our state, they can change it. That's the nature of why states are the right place for this type of responsibility. And that's why I introduced a plan to repeal Obamacare and replace it with a state-centric program.
Governor, you just heard the governor rebut your characterization, Obamacare. Why?
Let me first say to Sylvia, she has put her finger on one of the most important issues facing the country, which is President Obama stood before the nation in 2008 and said he promised to do health care reform focused on cost containment along with Republicans. He'd do it on a bipartisan basis.
The question, Governor, was why Obamacare?
That's right. Well, I'm going to get to that, John.
You have 30 seconds, Governor.
Yeah. So this is another example of him breaking his promise, and he has to be held accountable. And in order to prosecute the case against President Obama, you have to be able to show that you've got a better plan and a different plan. We took a different approach in Minnesota. We didn't use top-down government mandates and individual requirements from government. We created market alternatives and empowered consumers. I think that's the way to fix health care in the United States of America.
And you don't want to address why you called Governor Romney's Obamacare?
Well, the issue that was raised in a question from a reporter was what are the similarities between the two, and I just cited President Obama's own words that he looked to Massachusetts as a blueprint or a guide when he designed Obamacare.
But you say you were asked a question, which is fair enough, but you chose those words. And so one of my questions is, why would you choose those words, maybe in the comfort of a Sunday show studio? Your rival is standing right there. If it was Obamacare on Fox News Sunday, why is it not Obamacare standing here with the governor right there?
President Obama is the person who I quoted in saying he looked to Massachusetts for designing his program. He's the one who said it's a blueprint in that he merged the two programs, and so using the term Obamacare was a reflection of the president's comments that he designed Obamacare on the Massachusetts health care plan.
Governor, you want to respond to that at all?
No, just to say this, which is, my guess is the president is going to eat those words and wish he hadn't put them out there. And I can't wait to debate him and say, Mr. President, if in fact you did look at what we did in Massachusetts, why didn't you give me a call and ask what worked and what didn't? And I would have told you, Mr. President, that what you're doing will not work. It's a huge power grab by the federal government. It's going to be massively expensive, raising taxes, cutting Medicare. It's wrong for America, and that's why there's an outpouring across the nation to say no to Obamacare. And I'm delighted to be able to debate him on that.
Mr. Speaker, you have I'll let you. Mr. Speaker, you have at times said, you know, maybe you do have to consider a mandate. You've been very open to the individual mandate. It has become, it seems, at least at the moment, a litmus test in this Republican primary. Should it be?
Yes, it should be. If you explore the mandate, which even the Heritage Foundation at one time looked at, the fact is when you get into a mandate, it ultimately ends up with unconstitutional powers. It allows the government to define virtually everything, and if you can do it for health care, you can do it for everything in your life, and therefore we should not have a mandate. But I want to answer Sylvia at a different level. This campaign cannot be only about the presidency. We need to pick up at least 12 seats in the U.S. Senate and 30 or 40 more seats in the House, because if you are serious about repealing Obamacare, you have to be serious about building a big enough majority in the legislative branch that you could actually, in the first 90 days, pass the legislation. So I just think it's very important to understand, it's not about what one person in America does, it's about what the American people do, and that requires a senatorial majority as well as a presidency.
All right, we'll have more time to discuss the health care issue. Let's get down to the floor. Jennifer Vaughn from WMUR has a question from a voter.